Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into thy freedom, gladness, and light. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my sickness, into thy health. Out of my wanting, and into thy wealth. Out of my sin, and into thyself. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of my shameful failure and loss, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into the glorious gain of thy cross, Jesus, I come to thee. Out of her sorrows, into thy balm. Out of life's storms, and into thy calm. Out of distress, into jubilant song. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of unrest and arrogant pride, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into thy blessed will to abide. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of myself to dwell in thy love. Out of despair into raptures above. Upward forever on wings like a dove. Jesus, I come to thee. Out of the fear and dread of the Hey gang, welcome to tonight. We are having a forum for schooling from home. Everything has been turned upside down with the county's decision to go all virtual learning. And we understand that that is quite terrifying for some families, confusing for others, and we want to at least speak into that with some people who have done a great job at schooling from home. So we've invited panelists of four folks who, women who homeschool their families, and we know that making the transition from sending your kids to public school and having to do virtual learning all at home is quite the transition, so that we wanted to give these folks a chance to share some things that they've learned over the years, give you an opportunity to ask questions as well. So if you are watching online, then you can send in your questions. And where is that going to again, Joy? The phone number is on the screen. Exactly. So just text that your question to that phone number, and we'll talk about it towards the end of our time tonight. So I'm going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll get started. So Becky, why don't you go first?
Okay, my name is Becky Depiro. I have two boys. They are currently 11 and 12, so they're pretty close in age, and going into 6th grade and 7th grade, so back-to-back in school years. So they're in similar phases, which is kind of different than the rest of the crew here. We are starting our 8th year of homeschooling in August, and I work part-time from home. So just kind of giving you a snapshot of my life, I guess. I work part-time from home. The spine of our curriculum is Classical Conversations, which is a classical Christian community curriculum. And I'm a very structured homeschooler, Okay, we operate on a fairly strict schedule with lots of grace given.
Okay, I'm Kimberly Jordan, and I have 5 children. This is actually our first year schooling them all. We've homeschooled from the beginning. I have this year a 5-year-old, a 7, a 9, a 11, and 12-year-old. And I taught public school before staying home with my oldest when he was born, and never thought I would homeschool. It just was not on my radar. But when my oldest was 4, we started to look into our pre-K options, because that's what you do. And where we lived, there was a public school all-day, every-day program, and I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to let him be a child, and wasn't quite ready to give that away to somebody else. And then the Christian school, the local Christian school, had a program that was a little bit more flexible. But by then, I was pregnant with number 4 and knew that I couldn't keep up with that tuition. And so we just said, we'll be purposeful about teaching him what he needs to know for kindergarten, and we'll just go from there. And so I could say that we're accidental homeschoolers. And so we just went from there, and it has worked for us. My husband had really kind of crazy hours, and so it enabled the kids to be with him more often. It really fosters a relationship with the kids. We are not as strict probably as Becky is, but that's probably because we've always had babies and toddlers and tired pregnant mama along the way. And so we couldn't be on a strict schedule. I needed to be available for the younger ones if they needed. And so we do more of kind of a checklist kind of system. We really like homeschooling because it's really helped us to really embrace simplicity. We are a single income family, and so we just can't keep up with the Joneses, and we just kind of just enjoy doing our thing. And so over the years, it's just been very, very different, and have started to gain our confidence in where we are with schooling. I guess style-wise, we do more of a, some call it eclectic. I call it the yard sale approach. We just kind of pick and choose what works for us. Heavily, it's called Charlotte Mason. She's big on living books and nature and just developing character and good habits in your kids. So.
Hello, I'm Amy Jermaine, and I am a mom of 6 kids. My youngest is 5. I have an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 17-year-old. So we range from pre-K, kind of kindergarten, just getting started with that, up into a senior in high school this year. So they say I haven't lived until you've homeschooled a toddler and a high schooler at the same time, which I've done. So obviously we do a lot of managing of different ages and stages all at the same time. We have been homeschooling since my youngest was just going to school. Again, kind of like Kimberly, I could see the bus stop from our house, and I couldn't imagine putting a 5-year-old on a school bus at 9 o'clock in the morning and not seeing him again till 4 in the afternoon. And then there was a lady at our church that we went to at the time, and she was a homeschooling mom of many, and she had made a kind of a offhand comment of just how much she knew her children, and they didn't, it wasn't, what did you do at school today? She just really knew their hearts, and that just kind of resonated with me. And again, kind of like Kimberly, I was one who thought I'd never homeschool. I'm very much more relaxed, kind of more unscheduled homeschooler, and so my sister started homeschooling, and she's more the scheduled, all the lists and the planners and everything like that, and I thought I could never be like that. But we do the homeschooling, and it works for us. What I love about homeschooling is the relationship I have with my kids and the relationship they have with each other. I love the freedom it gives to go in depth. We tend to do unit studies where we go really in depth on a subject for a long time, and we incorporate field trips and hands-on learning and things like that into it, and we just have the freedom to do that. I also love that it gives homeschooling gives us the freedom when somebody's struggling in a certain area that we can take time and use a curriculum that fits their needs and get them up to on our own timetable. So definitely I'm not the perfectly organized, scheduled mom. We kind of use a wide assortment of curriculum. And let's see, and I just love that it gives my children the time to pursue their interests, and we kind of use a delight-directed learning where things that they are very interested in, they can pursue as far and as much as they want to.
My name is Rosemary Fitzgerald. We've been homeschooling for 5 years, since my youngest was in kindergarten. My kids are 10, 7, and 4 this year. Elizabeth thinks she's going on 14. She tries to keep up with everything the boys do at school, so she has her own little bags and little things. And, so if you have littles, you may need to, get them their own set of everything so that they can start. You'll be fascinated by how quickly they pick up things that their older siblings are doing if they're all home together. When Matthew was in kindergarten, we did a classical university model school for the first year where he was on campus 2 days a week, but it was still considered homeschool. And then we moved to this area, and I homeschooled at home by myself for a year, and I was lost. I had no community, no support, didn't know what curriculum to use, didn't know anybody else in the area, so it was a struggle. And then we fell into classical conversations, which we've done the last 3 years. And like Becky, that's kind of the backbone of our curriculum, and then we kind of just add on a plethora of various history and math and science and lots of library books and unit studies. We'll find something that we like and dive into that. But the biggest thing that I've discovered is that it's just really important to have some sort of support system, whether it's other people that are homeschooling that you can just call when you're having a rough day, or celebrate with when you're having a great day, or get curriculum ideas or prayer or whatever it is, just to have, even if it's just one other family or person that you can, rely on. So schedule, we don't have a set schedule. We like to pick up and go on a nature hike or go on a field trip or have friends over or whatever it is. So our day does not look the same any day of the week. But it works for us, and we still get everything done by the end of, well, whenever. Whenever that is. We school year round. So, yeah.
Okay, great. So we're going to hit on 3 major areas that we're going to kind of talk through and have these women share a little bit about. And the first area has to do with parents becoming teachers. So the situation is that either you're going to start homeschooling your kids, or your kids are, if they're in public school, then they'll be moving to a virtual model where they're at home all day, learning at the computer and so forth, and you are there to help guide them through that process. And so for some people, the big question is, how do you make that transition from being just kind of mom or dad who was there to help with some homework when they needed it, to no, you're there all day guiding them through this process, and because there's not a physical teacher in the room with them, having to help maybe go over the material with them again and help them understand it and so forth. So just talk a little bit about how you think parents can make that transition. Who wants to go? Amy.
Well, one of the things I initially thought was, well, you've always been your child's teacher. You've taught them how to tie their shoes, how to brush their teeth, how to do chores around their home. So it's just kind of shifting your area of focus. For us, homeschooling with the little ones or the younger ones is kind of coming along beside them and sitting down. At younger ages, they need more help. So kind of coming along beside them and working with them, learn along with them so that you can talk about what they're learning and you can have discussions about it. And then as they get older, you become more of a consultant/coach as they kind of learn to learn on their own.
Okay.
I think one thing is to set goals. Every child and every family is going to be different. Even the kids within your own household are going to be different with how they learn, what they struggle with, what they excel with. And I think one of the important things is to set goals for yourself in this journey and also for your kids, and know that those goals are going to change. So if there's things they're struggling with, maybe that you find something in that they can strive for to improve or to change things slightly, especially with virtual school. There's going to be kids that, it's a change for everybody. The teachers are going to have struggles and issues where they have to adjust throughout the year. The students are going to have things that they need to, work on. So I think it's important to set goals and do that with your child. And if you're going the homeschool route as opposed to the virtual school, know that you don't need to recreate public school at home, that you can change your mindset on you're the teacher and your student, every year the teachers have to change what works for their classroom, and you'll have to do that at home too. So I think just being patient, taking breaks when you need them. It's okay to say, you know what, we need a reset. Let's go take a half an hour, step away from it. We're not going to push forward right now because we're just beating our heads against a wall, and to just be patient and take breaks when you need to.
I think that if you're transitioning into virtual school, you've been given a gift this year to be with your kids more and to grow that relationship. That is a huge value in my house, that my kids' relationships with each other and that the relationships I have with them are very important to me, and are really deep relationships that we have, and you've been given that gift this year. So I just think when it gets hard, when you don't understand what the teacher is providing in the virtual learning environment, reach out to them, but also just give your student grace, because they probably don't understand it either, and it's a chance for you guys to grow together and learn it together and to grow your relationship.
One of the things that I keep hearing people saying that really sticks out to me is just that importance of the relationship. Because you are, whether you're going the choosing it all in homeschooling route or whether you're just doing the virtual schooling at home, you're going to be with your child all day, every day, and that's a gift, but it's hard. I actually was listening to a podcast today, and she said, if you're freaking out because all of a sudden you're going to have to hang out with your kids all day, every day, and you don't want to, maybe you need to help your kid change into somebody that you want to actually be with. And so maybe character or habits or things like that are things that you may need to work with your child on. Diligence is something that we work on a lot in our home. Attitudes, like all of those things. I mean, academics, yes, they are so important. However, at the end of the day, at the end of the schooling, when I am done with my children, it is more important to me that they are people of character, that they are people who have good habits, that they're people who know how to learn when there's something that they want to learn. And those things, to me, are just as important as learning the actual academics. The academics can come at any time. And so that's just something that really sticks out to me with regards to that, parent transitioning to being the teacher. You've been the teacher all along. What does that look like in a school at home kind of setting? And that might be, it's going to be beyond the academics.
I totally agree with Kimberly, just that it's not an interruption to stop and work on character. It's not an interruption to academics. So I totally agree with what she's saying there.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you said, Becky, that this is, you've been given a gift this year. I don't think we all think that. No, you've given me this terrible, awful situation and put me in. But I think if you can make that shift, right? And it's a very purposeful, intentional shift from this is a bad thing to no, this could be a really awesome thing this year. I know I was thinking a little bit about that this week in terms of my work here at the church and so forth. And instead of thinking every day, okay, what problem are we going to have to solve today? Because everything's changing every day, right? To, what problem do we get to solve today? This is a great time to learn new things. And if we fail, well, then we fail. Like, we're doing our best, and when you think about it's a great time to learn with your kids, to be with your kids, to have that time with your kids. Maybe that's one of the things that God's doing through all this. And as you guys were saying a little bit about how it's going to affect their character building process, I'm assuming it's going to affect your character building process as well, right? Like
Absolutely.
diligence and patience and things of that nature. So thank you so much. That was really helpful. Okay, let's move on to the next area. So I was thinking in terms of tips for productive school time. So in terms of the timing of the day, and when to do schoolwork, when is it okay to take breaks, to just play. Talk a little bit about sort of a good rhythm or some tips that you've found to be helpful during sort of the school day, if you will.
I will talk a little bit about rhythm is what you are scheduled. Y'all, I don't know what you do. We call it it's our rhythm, it's our routine, and I will also say this is so specific to season of life and your other children. Over the last 8 years that we've been schooling, it has looked very different. So I'll speak to what it is currently. We have we start at breakfast 8:30, and that's when our day starts. One of the routines that I really stress with mine is it's just this is what we do. This is our daily routine. It doesn't turn into a thing because they're not asking for screen time at 9 o'clock in the morning because they know that's not what we do. And so it makes it not a thing. So for specifically, ours, we start at 8:30. They have a checklist that they have individual work that they do. At some point during the morning, we'll have our together time. Somebody told me very early on, do as much together as you can. So that's when we do our history, things like that. And then the littles are usually done by lunch, and then the big kids, however long it takes them. And they kind of have an order to go in, but we never, I won't say never. Last year, when McCrae was all up in our business, I would put on a learning show for him once a day, and we would try to knock out some things. But for the most part, we no screen time until after. When I say screen, their math is online. The stuff that they're actually doing for curriculum doesn't count. But they're not allowed to watch any shows until like 3 or 4, and that's after school, after chores, after they've had time outside. And Monday through Thursday, it's only learning shows or documentaries. And so we just have kept it to that, and for the most part, follow it. And I just stress, this is just what we do. And so it's not a battle, it's not a thing, it's just, that's what our family does. And so we don't have to, we've just kind of built that.
Okay, so I'm more scheduled, right? I know I'm weird in that, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. I wake up my kids about 7:30, and they get dressed, and we go for a mile run. I have 2 boys. They are 11 and 12. They need to burn some energy right in the morning. I started that about 1.5 years ago, and it transformed our school day. They went from just not focused and wiggly to ready to come back and get started on schoolwork. I'm not sure if it's because the physical exertion of running, or they talked to me the whole time for 30 minutes and got every thought out of their brain, every other thought that could be distracting, and I caught up on them, and then we could focus a bit more on our school day. We come back home. It could be a walk versus a run, but we come back home, and I kind of prepare breakfast or get started on it while they do some independent work. We have breakfast together and devotional Bible study time. Then we delve into they're either 30-minute blocks, 45-minute blocks, or hour-long blocks, depending on what we're working on. I don't schedule anything more than an hour, right? I do have a 6th and 7th grader, so they can kind of sit there and do math for an hour now at their age. I didn't expect that a few years ago. I didn't expect them to sit still for more than 30 minutes at a time. And then we just cycle through the day. They might do one thing sitting down, like math, We kind of knock out our harder things in the morning, and then we break it up with some chore time, where everyone gets up and we go do our chores, and we come back and we might do Latin. And then we break it up with some together time reading aloud. We call it togetherness at my house. Break that up until lunchtime, and we have lunch. And mine are scheduled for schoolwork until 2 or 2:30. If they're diligent and they do their work well within that time, then they are done, and they may have free time. They need to go outside and wiggle, or they need to do something creative. They are allowed 1 hour of screen time a day if they have been diligent and completed their work by 2 or 2:30. So if they don't, I am off the schedule at that point because I have to work. So usually about 1, I need to start working till about 5. They finish up their work on their own. Any homework, I call it homework if they haven't completed something on their schedule. They do it on their own. I check it, they correct it, that kind of routine. And they lose their screen time if they haven't worked diligently for that day and finished their work on time. So I will say I do that schedule for a reason. It kind of evolved into more scheduled for us, because we would start something like math or read aloud and just want to keep doing it. I'd read a chapter in our read aloud and they beg for another. We could just sit there and read our book all day. Or we could learn about, whatever we're learning about, snakes, or if we're learning about the Civil War, we could just sit there and, dive down snake trails about the Civil War all day and not get our other things done, which is fun, and it has a place, but we have other things to get done. So I actually have a schedule so that we won't get distracted.
Interesting you say that, because Matthew and I have been doing, my 10-year-old have been doing a lot of read aloud lately. I've been reading chapter books to him, and we hadn't done that so much recently because he just hadn't wanted to, and all of a sudden we got back into it, and he's like, more, let's do this more, this is awesome. And I had kind of forgotten how much he still enjoyed me reading to him. I think that's really important at any age. I still do it with the younger ones, but I had kind of not been doing it. So anyway, the first half of last year went really well with not really having any sort of schedule. I would give Matthew a checklist, and I had talked to him about what he wanted to do. I gave Matthew a checklist and said, this is what you need to do each day, and there's also a few things that just have to get done by the end of the week, and he did great with it. And then my other two were younger. They were, 6 and 3, and so it was a whole lot less school time each day. My 6-year-old only did an hour and a half or whatever. And as the year progressed, Matthew started getting a little distracted and not getting through his checklist every day, and realizing he came to the realization that that wasn't working for him anymore. And so I think we're actually going to do a little bit more scheduled time this year, because it was very easy to, get off. He loves math, and he would sit there and do 3 math lessons. I'm like, but you didn't do any writing. So what worked for us the first half of the year really well, as his personality changed and he got too comfortable with it, we realized it wasn't working. So I think one thing is just be flexible and know that just because something works for a while or doesn't work, that you may need to transition. So he and I have actually talked about what we're going to do more this year to be more intentional with our time. So I'm kind of looking at doing a mix of more blocked out time. So I think you just have to figure out, if you're doing the virtual school, your child's going to have kind of more of a set schedule, but you're still going to have other things that you need to incorporate, whether it's homework that they're assigned or chores, but if you're doing homeschool, you have a lot of options, and what starts out may not be, how you finish. And with the younger ones, I think the important thing to remember is a kindergartner or a first grader doesn't need, I know at virtual school they're still doing, I guess, several hours, but they don't need 5 hours of sitting at a table doing book work, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe. And then you do a lot of read alouds, and you do hands-on play and things like that. So it's going to look different depending on the ages.
In our school, we're pretty unstructured. So my kids get checklists. Basically, they set up a kind of a schedule of what they're going to, each class, and kind of what they have to do. For my older ones, that's pretty independent. I kind of check over my younger ones, and they kind of go through it as they want to during the day. They know that if you don't get your schoolwork done, you don't get free time later on. For my youngers, we kind of incorporate, I feel like part of school is learning to, cooking with me or cleaning, doing chores with me. All that is kind of life learning. So we do that. I agree with the read alouds. Even my high schoolers love to do when we do family read alouds. Trying to think. I don't know. We kind of just get it done, and people get it done as they do. We're just kind of easygoing that way, and that works for us.
Something that just came to mind that, right now our season is that we do it in the morning and we get it done. When Cademan, my oldest, when he was kindergarten, and we had 4 children under him, 3, 4, so I don't know how many I had at that point, under him, even when he was in kindergarten, even partly into 2nd grade when I already was schooling another one, we had normal mornings where we played. Like, really, his schedule didn't change at all. And so depending on if you're home educating or if you're doing the virtual schooling, I don't know how much flexibility you have, but if your oldest is kindergarten first, maybe even 2nd grade, like Rosemary was saying, it really doesn't take very long to get their stuff done. And if you have the flexibility, it doesn't have to be first thing in the morning. It worked better for us to be able to have normal mornings where the siblings were playing together. And then we got really it was just reading and math and some writing, done in the afternoon while everybody else was napping. And having that focused time with him worked out really well. So you just do what works for your family.
And one other thing, I was thinking about what Becky said about the exercise. When my kids get really unfocused and they just can't concentrate, I will send them out to run up and down the driveway or jumping jacks or push-ups, and it works wonders.
Great. So I heard a couple key things. One were it sounded like there's obviously some boundaries that you've set in place, that that's not just a free-for-all all day, but in each of your the ways that you teach at home, you've set up some sort of boundaries there. And then it also sounds like the kids know what to expect. So one word that I heard was checklists. So a checklist is great because then if you're given a checklist, then you know what's expected of you. Like on the weekends, my wife has some things in her mind she wants me to do. I have other things in my mind I want to do. So, and she expects me to read her mind and do those things. So I'm like, honey, just write it down, give me a checklist, and I'll knock it out. So it sounds like that works pretty well for your kids too. And then again, also finding some flexibility, maybe if things are going awry or if they need a break or something like that. So, all right, awesome. So sort of related to this in terms of timing of the day and everything, but a little bit different is the environment that you're creating at home, maybe the physical environment. So, a lot of dads or moms have had to transition from working at a workplace in a building to working from home, and they've had to rearrange the house a certain way. And I would imagine that you guys have rearranged your homes in a certain way to facilitate an environment where your kids can learn well. So why don't you just share a little bit about the environments that you've created in your own home?
When we first bought our house, we have a bedroom that's over off the kitchen. I was like, oh, this would be perfect to our homeschool room. And then I realized I had a 1.5-year-old, and that wasn't going to work to be in this confined space trying to school. So that worked for about 2 weeks. And then we were like, okay, we're just going to do most of our school at the dining room table, which is right next to the kitchen, which the kitchen and the living room is where I spend most of my time throughout the day, and the laundry room's right there. So we do a lot of the schoolwork just at the kitchen table, and then when we do morning time, we're on the couch or we're on the floor. We're flexible throughout the whole downstairs, and we keep our supplies close, and they know they have their own little. We put in a bookshelf that has doors on it that close like a cabinet, and they have their own little shelf on it, and they know where to get all their own supplies from, and they just do it. Now Matthew's older, so he goes up to his bedroom to do certain things, and then he, brings them back down for me to check when he's done. But the expectation is there for him to do it and come back. But I think the biggest thing is wherever you're going to do schoolwork, if your kids, especially at the age where they still need assistance, which is, all the way up through definitely elementary, to have them close to where you're going to spend your day. So you're not hauling curriculum up and down. You're not trying to go up and down checking things, or, be close to where you're going to be. At least that's what worked for us. And there's times where it's a nice day, we go out in the yard, or we go out on the back porch, or we go to the library to get books, and so we go do a little bit of work at the library while we're there. I think it's important to change the environment. You'll even see that in the public school where, they have carpet squares, they have different tables and chairs, and so it's important, at least for the younger ones, to change their environment and change their setting as well.
For us, we do most of the schooling at our kitchen table. That's great for the younger ones because I can kind of move around and help the kids as needed. My older ones, I have one that likes to listen to music and to be kind of alone, so he'll sometimes go up to his room to do work, but that's contingent on you have to be trustworthy. You have to show me that you used your time wisely, or that privilege is not going to be there. I have one child who likes to lay on the floor and do his schoolwork there, and as long as he's doing that, that's fine by me. We have gone outside and sat on our front porch and done school on nice days. I have put up barriers when somebody was being totally distracting or distracted by everything going on. I have put up a physical barrier to give that person a little bit of you need to concentrate. So, and then we kind of we have sets of kind of those scrapbooking drawers, and everybody keeps their different books and stuff, so they know exactly where their books and papers and things like that go.
We have a homeschool room in our current house. It basically has bookshelves in it where we keep our curriculum, and it has a table, which is mostly just used for overflow when we entertain. The table they sit at, they're required to sit there when they do their computer work, which is like the math. And I have instituted that they must sit there when they're doing writing and not snuggled up in the recliner because their handwriting is atrocious. So those two things they're required to sit at the table for. Otherwise, so I would say you need a table and you need a comfy spot. Comfy spot is usually in our den. They just snuggle up, and that's when we do our together time. That's where they choose to do their reading. Our master bedroom is actually downstairs, and so that's the coveted spot for them to do their independent reading. I'll go, my door is closed, what's going on in there? And I go in there, and inevitably there is somebody in my bed reading their book. And thankfully they make it up after them, after they're done. But they all, I'll hear, oh man, and so-and-so had gotten there first. So they kind of just rotate through. So really to school at home, I think you need a table, a writing surface, and a spot to be comfortable. And then outside, they need plenty of outside time too.
Ours has evolved, right, as my kids have gotten older. We used to do school in our previous home at the dining room table or the kitchen table, and had a bookcase in the that area, and everything was there. They were younger. This house, we have a homeschool room that's up in the front of the house, right, in the big mess, right, when everyone walks in the front door can see our homeschool mess, but that's kind of where we live. We had a table there originally, and last year we transitioned to 3 desks. So I have a desk with my computer to work at, and they each have a desk that faces me. So it kind of is like a big table, but they each have their own space, and that works well for us. Most of their schoolwork is done there. That's math, cursive, things that they really need to focus on. If they're reading, they can go snuggle up in the living room, which is just the next room over, and I can still see them. And I know where they're at, and they can holler out to me if they have questions about a word or something. But so I agree with the table in a comfy spot. And most of the time, we're all downstairs together on the main floor. Sometimes they request to go upstairs into their own room. I'm still suspicious of that, though, so that doesn't happen very often yet. But I can see as they get older that would be allowed and okay.
Great. So it does sound like there's a lot of oversight, even with the environments that you've created of your children and their learning going through the day, because they need that, right? They need, maybe the older kids are going to need less oversight if they've earned it, right? And so forth. Have any of you struggled with, I'm not trying to throw any kids under the bus, so no names. Have any of you struggled with kids that just did not want to do their work?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you need more? Yes, I have 2 of those.
Okay.
You can guess which 2. So, and that's just, it's been that way since they were born. They, especially one of them, doesn't really like to do what I have put forth for him, ever. But it's fine. We work through it, and we're better for it. We're better for working through it. He does not think school is a good idea for anyone, ever.
Okay.
So you can pray for me in that. But you know what? I still love homeschooling him.
Yeah.
We learn a lot together, and we still have a lot of fun together in those struggles and those hard days, and they do make me better. I have more patience than I did when I started this journey, and I have given him more grace. And we have prayed together so many times, just that I would not be angry and frustrated too, and that he could focus and do what he needs to do. We have a lot of talks about that, and it's only grown us, even in the first, oh man. If you catch me on a day when we're struggling, I can tell you all about it. But it is a struggle, but we truly are better for it.
Okay. Yeah, and I imagine a big part of it's you're parenting your child, and that takes a lot of work and prayer and a support system. Like you mentioned earlier, it's good to have a support system in place. And so I would highly encourage the folks who are doing the public school virtual learning to have a support group. Grab a couple friends and be able to talk about this and share ideas and encourage one another, because it's not going to be easy. So, all right. So the last area is basically audience questions that we're gonna ask, and I'm gonna start with one. And we had a couple folks text in already, but here's sort of a rapid fire question. So you guys are homeschooling, but pretend that you were in this situation where, a couple weeks ago, the superintendent of schools says your kids will not be coming into school physically. They will be learning virtually from home. What's the first thing you do? Or buy, or whatever?
Pray.
Okay.
And then I'd probably start figuring out I would talk to friends that I knew that use certain curriculum and figure out what my goals are for the year in terms of what subjects we want to study. And
Well, look.
are you talking virtual school?
We're talking. You've got to use the curriculum that the school.
Okay.
They're going to go virtual at Chesterfield County Public Schools. What's the first thing that you're going to do?
Figure out where we're going to school and get that room set up and ready, whether that means pencils, binders, a desk, a school, whatever we want that room to look like, to get my kids in the mindset that this is where your school is going to be. You're not going to a classroom. This is where school is.
Create an environment. Amy.
I guess it's just kind of figuring out what the expectations are. What's that going to look like during the day? How, what kind of oversight, how much, just kind of learning all those details about what is this actually going to look like in practicality.
So you want to know immediately what the school's expectations are and so forth.
Right,
And
what's required of my
required.
student, how that's all going to work.
Great. Kim?
Trying to put myself in that mindset. The honestly first thing I'd probably do would be cry.
Which a lot of people have.
You said pray. I thought cry. But yeah, I'm a planner. So I think the biggest thing that would bother me, for lack of a better word, would be the unanswered question. So I would probably be finding out what would be required of me, schedule, do they have to I mean, I have these questions and I'm not even involved. Like, do they have a certain time they have to check in? What do they have to do? What's expected of the kids?
Becky?
I can only play off of what I know with my kids now, right? So I think if even someone came to me now and said I'd be required to go do the virtual learning this year, I think with a 6th and 7th grader, I would sit down and talk to them and have a frank conversation about what my struggles are with this. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like, and I can't answer all your questions, but we're going to figure it out together. And it's not going to be easy every day, but we're going to work together and kind of make a team and set that expectation up that you're there for them.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so while I do have a couple audience questions, I'd love to start with anyone that's here in the room. And you can just tell me your question, and then I'll repeat it through the microphone. So, any questions that you have? Yes, Brittany. Okay, start with one. Okay, so the question is, what role do the dads play in the homeschooling or schooling from home environment? Because obviously we have an all-female panel, and you guys have taken on the major portion responsibility of this. But yeah, so what part do the dads play? We'll just go down the line,
I'll go.
Rosemary. Yeah.
So my husband works, out of the home pretty much all the time, but he's home in the evenings, weekends, a little bit flexible. If I'm having major issues with any of the kids throughout the day where we're just butting heads or we're just having a really tough day, sometimes I call just to calm myself down so he can be, my shoulder to cry on when I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Or also if I just need, him to talk on the phone to a kid to kind of help diffuse the situation. Because sometimes when you are with your kids all day and you're trying to do learning and academics, and even when we have been doing it for years, there's times where you're going to just get frustrated, and it's good to have kind of somebody to help diffuse that situation. But the things that he excels in, like public speaking or writing outlines and things like that, I default to that on him. I might get the kids started, and then he takes over, or he helps proof things. So anything that, your husband knows that maybe he's passionate about, get him involved, whether it's math or history, or, have him do read-alouds on certain subjects, or, so definitely get the dads involved, even if you are the primary homeschooler.
Like Rosemary, my husband works out of the house, so he's there evenings and weekends, and I totally agree. I've called when I've been butting heads with one of our children and say, please, tell me what to do. How do I handle this when, everything I've tried isn't working? So it's a great place for advice, and again, just that an outside perspective sometimes really helps when you're kind of in the heat of the moment. As we have had older kids, my husband is very strong in science and math, so my oldest just went through a physics class, and so my husband was very helpful when he got stuck. I said, you need to help him with that. And so sometimes when I'm not, especially with the math and science, when I'm not explaining something well and they're not quite getting it, then he'll step in the evening and go over things with them to help them out.
My husband also works outside of the home and has, throughout this whole thing. I would say yes to all of your questions. He's the principal. He's the substitute when mom has somewhere to go. He is, and we do a lot with, Charlotte Mason calls it narration, just talking about what you've learned, kind of processing through, making those connections. And I mean, those happen at the dinner table or when he comes home for lunch, or I mean, you specifically asked about his role in the homeschool, and I think the thing that really stuck out or just came to mind is the fact that home educating doesn't just happen during this time to this time. When we had littles, you know, or I mean, even at any time, he'll take some of the kids while I'm working with, you know, like in the evening, he would put the littles to bed while I finished a read aloud with the big kids. I think the only thing we've never done, and we've never said, okay, Dad's in charge of this subject, because he does have a job outside of the home, and I see homeschooling and homemaking as my job, and that's my responsibility, and not that he can't help or he doesn't, but I feel like those are my responsibility. I mean, because he's a manager of a state park, he gets us in there, and we, he kind of takes over the nature stuff. If the kids find a snake that they don't know, I mean, he's kind of the go-to for those kind of things.
Okay, so Tony, my husband, works out of the house. Like, he has an office in our home, and he is there usually in a normal year. He is there 1 day a week, which is the day that we're out of the house at Classical Conversations. It just happens that way. It's Monday. Right now, he is home more often. We find that during the school day, so that he's not constantly getting interrupted in his office, and we're not constantly getting interrupted, that we try to respect each other's schedules and let Dad work, because he's on and off the phone and calls and things like that. So he's upstairs in his office, often with the door closed, and we're down in the schoolroom working. I do find opportunities that aren't necessarily in our schedule that Dad can help with. If they have a random question, it's usually a hard theology question that Dad can help with. Like, go ask your dad why God made a minute a minute. You know, he helps with those. And also, we give a presentation each week at Classical Conversations, so Tony helps with those a lot. The kids kind of get an idea, and then he helps them write out their notes and practice their presentation, because we can do that on a Sunday afternoon, and it's not interrupting his work schedule. He also works hard to make sure that they are respecting me as their main person in there in the schoolroom with them. That's a big role that he fills as well.
Okay, good. That's really helpful to know all those things. Oh, Rosemary has something to add.
Just one more thing to add.
Are we on? Is she? Sorry. Yeah. Do you want me to turn the other one back on? Okay. Sorry.
Am I on? Hi.
Okay.
The one thing that I was going to add that came to me is, don't get frustrated if you say something or give advice on something or whatever it is, and your child just doesn't listen or doesn't get it or whatever, and your spouse says the exact same thing using the exact same words, and they're like, oh yeah, I get that, totally makes sense, or I get it, or they're not frustrated about it, because sometimes it's just that you've been together too much and they're shutting down or whatever. So don't get frustrated, or try not to, or offended or upset when your spouse says the same exact thing, and it goes better, because it will happen.
So what you're saying, it is a partnership. There is for you guys, the mom has taken the main responsibility, but it's shared in a lot of different ways. So that's, good. Is that helpful? Okay. Let me get to one question that was texted in, and I've been told that the first number that we put on the screen for you to text questions in is the wrong number. So someone else is getting those questions. So the number that's on the screen right now is the correct number to text your questions into. So if you did it before, please resend those questions. That'd be great. So here's one question. I think it's a really important question, honestly. How do you fit exercise into your day as a mom or dad when you have no time for yourself? So it sounds like you guys are with your kids like kind of 24/7 right now. especially during COVID when things aren't happening. And normally, obviously, if you're not homeschooling, your kids go off to school and you might have time to go to the gym and work out. But if they're home all the time and they're not old enough for you to leave them alone, how can you fit in time for yourself?
I'll start with that one. You have to be intentional. You know, all these things, you have to be intentional with it and make it a priority. I do believe if there's a will, there's a way. So I'm scheduled, as you've heard, and I get up at 5 a.m. I'm intentional with that. I've done it for years, so it's not hard every morning. It's only hard some mornings now. I get up and I work out. I go straight. Right now I'm working out in my garage, or I'm running, and I start that workout before I can even really realize what I'm doing. It's such a habit now that that's what I have to do. And then I have the coffee pot ready when I'm done working out, and I have my coffee and do my Bible study. Very intentional with that. Sometimes that time bleeds into when I need to wake up the kids, and therefore I don't get a shower in the morning. So don't show up at my house on a school morning. I'm probably not showered. And but that's okay. I've decided that those are priorities for me, and I'm intentional with that, and that's how it works for me.
I am very scheduled about my own time, not the kids. So my alarm goes off at 6, and I get up shortly after that, and I have my coffee and my Jesus time before I work out. And my goal is to be working out by 7 or 7:30 so that I can wake up. We tried alarms. They don't work. So that I can try to wake the kids up and be eating by 8 or 8:30. And that's another one of those seasonal things. I had a season. This year I have been really, really trying to be intentional and diligent about during our school time being available only to the kids for school. I might be folding laundry, but I'm not on Facebook, and I'm not doing my workout. There was a season where I was trying to do my workout, and I would get upset if they came to me with questions because they're interrupting. So I really have tried to just carve out that 8 till lunchtime as that I am just focused on the kids. There was also a season where I did it in the afternoon when they were having snack. But if it's a priority, then it's something that you'll make time for.
I guess for our family, our exercise looks a little different. We all do Taekwondo together. So our school has some classes during the middle of the day, so I've been able to take everybody kind of as a break in between kind of morning and afternoon school, and we would go up there and work out together, or we do it in the evenings together, or Saturday morning together. So we kind of see that as an activity that we all do as a family, which is pretty fun.
Great. All right. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Questions here in the room? Anybody?
I have more if nobody else. I have a few from online.
Okay.
So one, I'm going to bucket some of these together because they're similar. How will you be socializing your kids in lieu of COVID? And socialization is a big concern for us. How do you gauge the need for more or less socialization?
Okay, so the question revolves around socialization and your children during COVID, okay? So obviously, they're not having as much interaction with kids. They're not going to school. We're not meeting in big crowds or anything like that. And then how do you gauge how much socialization your kids need? And Kate?
One child.
Yeah.
So like your kids can, you have other people in the house.
Right.
So like what would you recommend? I mean, I know we can get involved in other groups and stuff, but.
Okay, and so the follow-up to that is especially if you might only have one child at home. And again, we're thinking about the virtual thing from what they're used to, but then added to that is the whole COVID issue and everything. So, thoughts?
The socialization thing always kind of makes me giggle because I was a child in school who always got in trouble for talking. And then I was a teacher who always got after my kids for talking. And so, you know, I always have this thing, well, school isn't for socializing either, but I understand the being with your friends and things like that. I have a couple children who thrive on being and just desire having time with friends. And then I have some that are like me and they're perfectly happy to be at home and be home buddies. So with regards to socialization, we have friends that we get together with. Non-COVID times, they were involved in drama and there's homeschool groups and things like that. A lot of that is, I mean, it's just honestly up in the air on what's going to start back and what that's going to look like. But I think, I mean, again, it's talking to your kids about, are you content to, you know, be at home? Are you feeling like you need to be with friends, and what does that look like for your individual kids and what their needs are? I think that sometimes we assume that they are wanting or needing a certain something without, just because that's what they're used to. They're used to going and doing and being in school all day and then going to sports and then going to dance, and that might not be what they necessarily need or want.
I think honestly, some of the time off we had this summer was a relief to some of my kids, that it was a little bit quieter and we weren't rushing off to places. We've done some Zoom. We have a very small co-op, so it's just a few families that we're involved in, and we were able to transition online, and so my kids were able to get online and Zoom and talk to their friends that way. And I think, yeah, just trying to be intentional with smaller, you know, have a friend over or get together in just a smaller group through the COVID.
I think that's important, is like you said, being intentional. And if your kid's old enough to express that, you know, have those conversations. How much, you know, who do you want to see? Who do you want to get together with? What's important to you? And then the younger ones, you kind of just have to gauge with attitudes, because they don't always know that that's what they're missing in their life right then. And with regard to COVID, I think it's a very personal thing. You know, some people are more okay with getting together with friends. Some are less. It may need to be, we need to go to a park, or we need to go on a nature hike, or we need to do something more outdoors as opposed to have people over, because some people aren't at that same comfort level that other people are. So I think it's being aware of what other people are comfortable with right now, and being very intentional to bring that in. Whether, you know, we have done some Zoom calls, and the kids certainly don't like that as much, but it's something. But then, you know, just gauging, you know, find people in your child's life that, you know, they specifically want to, and maybe you find a few people and you know, rotate homes, or you rotate times that you're getting together and doing various things.
Awesome. Great. Okay, any other questions? Maybe one more?
Can I just share an idea with that?
Sure.
Is that my kids, we do a lot of Zoom calls, and my son in particular will only be on a Zoom call, like, come on, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. For him, it's like a chore. But if he calls his friend on my phone and he can walk around with it and show him his room and show him his toy, and I can't stand moving my phone around like that, but he's been on the call, like, with his friend for 30 minutes, and when he finished, he was like, oh, I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
You know, so it's different, just being able to have that mobility and show his friend his world, and, you know, vice versa.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Zoom calls are great, but for my kids, it's like, I need to move.
Okay, so the advice was maybe transition from a Zoom call to FaceTime, where kids can move around the house and share with their friends what they're doing and what their home looks like, and how what they're up to. So, all right, Brittany, I'm going to give you another shot here.
All right, I'm jumping way ahead. I know we're trying to figure things out, but I'm a planner, so I need to know the end game. So, assuming that the kids have SOLs again, and assuming that homeschoolers have to do like the end of year proof of progress testing, how does that work? How do you know that what you're teaching is going to be on this test? And do you administer it yourselves, or do you have someone else administer it?
Okay, so this is a little bit question is a little bit more towards homeschooling, right?
Homeschooling requirement, end of the year
Homeschooling requirements. And so the question was, how do you know what the state requires for testing and progress and everything for your homeschool kids at the end of the year?
I'm just going to tell you my experience. There's options, right? Evaluation, portfolio. I've not done those. I have done the testing. I homeschooled originally in Oklahoma. That's where we started. I did not even have to tell anyone that I was homeschooling. They did not know my children existed. Okay. Then we were moving here, and I had a panic attack because I had to test them, right? And I didn't know if they'd pass the test. I don't know. But it was fine. It's fine. We do an online testing format that's not timed. It takes my kids now, it's on the computer. We do the CAT test, California Achievement Test. I think a lot of homeschoolers use that test. Not timed, I think you can get a coupon, it's $20 a kid each year. I chose that the first year, 5 years ago here in Virginia, and used it every year. So now I know, my kids know the format of the test. They almost have some of the questions memorized from year to year. And, then the way the results are presented are similar, and I can compare. So I can see strengths and weaknesses, and we can celebrate them and then, figure out what we need to work on the next year, okay? But I use that in a very loose way. Like, I still tested this year, even though we don't turn them in, just for my own information. It took my kids, maybe 3 hours total. There's no stress involved. I am not teaching to that test. It is basic knowledge. It covered math, language, reading comprehension. So not science or social studies. I think they'd be fine in those things. But it's just enough to let me know that we're okay. We are fine. We're actually better than fine. I'm not sure how, but we are, and it's okay. So that's what we do.
I've used a different test where I've had a person administer it to my children. And it kind of shows up like one of our math curriculum doesn't do, it doesn't address subtraction until a little bit later than most, like the schools do. So it's, I know that they're not going to score as well in that, and that's fine. And for Chesterfield, or I guess for HEAV, like the bar that you have to set, I think it's like they have to be above the 24th percentile. So you'll be fine. And like Becky was saying, it's only kind of like reading, language arts and math, and that's it. So you don't really, like everything else, you have freedom there.
So there are obviously requirements that have to be met, and you guys would know, to help Brittany and other folks homeschooling for the first time, where to go find those requirements and how best to maybe make sure that your kids are getting it. Sounds like that's what you wanted to know. Okay, so one of the things that we are going to do is have our panelists put together a resource list of either books or websites that they use, and we'll send that out to everyone that's attended tonight and everything. So, and they'll have their contact information, and you can contact them because they have all said before we started they're willing to help out in any way that they can. So, Joy, was there any other?
The other questions probably pertain to what you're going to send out. There are questions about curriculum. This one would probably pertain to all parents. If you could just very quickly just name your favorite read aloud as a family together book. This says particularly for ages 3, 6, and 9.
Okay, favorite read aloud to your children book, specifically ages 3 through 9. 3 through 9. Favorite read aloud book?
Oh, it's maybe for a 9-year-old, 8 to 9. I'm going to go with Wing Feather Saga by Andrew Peterson. We're reading through it for the second time right now. I highly recommend it. So a little bit older for young, gosh, I would read slightly above, the 3-year-old's reading level doesn't really have a reading level. So for that age range, I would read like 4th to 5th grade reading level. I'd read on the higher end. so that you're increasing their vocabulary, and you honestly can't go wrong. If it's, and you know, the advice I'd give is read something that you enjoy as well, so that you don't fall asleep.
I know, how do you choose? I will say The Secret Garden, because I remember that was one of the first, like, chapter book read-alouds that we read. You know, I feel like I had kids in that age range. You talking about it being over some of their, some of the vocabulary. It is amazing what those little ones will pick up on. McCray, his vocabulary is amazing. He's 5, and he was talking about something, we were having a picnic, and the squirrels were in his territory. I'm like, not your area, your territory, okay. And I very distinctly remember after reading that book, Ellery she was probably around 5 when we read it. She, went out and started like scratching at a plant and was like, oh, I see the wick. And it was just, we just really enjoyed sharing that story together. And that was one that really, they were at that, right in that age range, and it made an impact and kind of sparked that, interest in reading the story together.
One that we've read recently is The Mysterious Benedict Society, and I think I had as much fun reading it as my kids did listening to it.
We've been focusing more lately on like history books, because that's just what all my kids have been interested in. So we've been doing like the Who's Who series and the Story of the World, and so we've been doing more of that as opposed to like fictional storybooks. That's just what they wanted to do.
Awesome. All right. So I think our time is up, and I just want to say thank you to our panelists here. Appreciate you guys so much. And again, they are going to be available to you as a resource, and to give you some other resources you can go to. I would say the biggest encouragement that I kind of came away with tonight was just, hey, let's see this as a challenge and as an adventure, and as something that God is doing that can be turned from a nightmare into something that's really beautiful, about spending time with your children, being able to come alongside them in a deeper way and helping them learn throughout the year and get to know them, develop their character. I think we could really turn this thing around, and it could be one of the best things that happens in their life, because we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So let's take advantage of it and see what God is doing in and through it, and run with that. So again, thanks again for joining us online, here in the room as well, and look for an email in your inbox with some follow-up material. So thanks again.